What's up there, fuzzlicious fluff napkins? Riv here, and today we are going to talk about 6 misconceptions I had when I joined the furry fandom. Before we get started, a quick shout out to our amazing patrons. You are super awesome. If you would like to consider becoming a patron as well, there's a link down in the description. The first misconception that I had was that I could become a furry artist. As soon as I got active in the fandom, I started seeing all this amazing anthropomorphic artwork, and I was like, I'm going to learn how to draw that. That didn't go well. Now, I know some people say that anyone can learn to be an artist, but I'm not so sure about that. We all had those 1 or 2 kids in our class in school that were just natural artists that didn't spend thousands of hours practicing or studying anatomy or anything. They could just do it. And a lot of the really great furry artists were probably those ones that were born with a little something extra that the rest of us might not have. Not to say you can't become a good artist, but it's really, really difficult. I gave it a try, and the results were really, really embarrassingly bad. I draw like a 3-year-old. I quickly came to the realization that art was best left to the professionals or the amateurs who are good at it, and I'd rather pay somebody to make good art than make bad art myself for free. I don't want to be discouraging to anyone out there who's working on becoming a furry artist, but it's not easy, and I just didn't personally have the time to put into it, and I definitely didn't have any natural ability to draw or paint or do any other visual art. My creativity pretty much revolves around these things back here and making these videos for you. The second misconception I had was that the adult side of the fandom would be kind of hidden out of the way, and people that didn't really want to see that or who were too young to see it wouldn't be exposed to it if they didn't go and seek it out. Oh boy, was I wrong about that. I learned very quickly that it's kind of hard to avoid, and not everybody who enjoys that aspect of the fandom is the most responsible, shall we say, about tagging stuff and using AD accounts and content warnings and things like that. Some people's involvement in the fandom revolves primarily around that aspect, and they tend to associate with other people who are like-minded. Sometimes I think they end up coming to the false conclusion that they're the majority and that everyone else needs to bend to their desires. And let's say they can be less than modest about the type of things that they share on their social media. I remember about 4 to 6 months ago, a pretty well-known furry Twitch streamer tweeted that he's going to put hardcore adult stuff all over his main Twitter account, and if kids see it, it's their parents' fault. Yikes. But that's the mentality that some people have about it. In an ideal world, people would use alternate accounts that were 18 plus. People would use filters, hashtags, content warnings, things like that to prevent people from seeing adult content who don't want to see it or shouldn't have to see it like children. Whether that should be the case or not is irrelevant. It's just not going to happen. I learned pretty quickly that you have to decide what you're comfortable with and use blocking and muting and filters and things like that to get rid of the stuff you're not comfortable with. That might even involve avoiding certain websites or avoiding certain social media. A lot of furry adult stuff tends to be on Fur Affinity, DeviantArt, and on Twitter. If you just avoid Twitter, you can avoid seeing a lot of it. Now, you may want to see it, and that's cool if you do, but just realize that it's kind of up to you to filter things. Another misconception that I had was that I was going to find a romantic relationship in the furry fandom. When I first really got active in the fandom, it was on the Fur Affinity forums. Then we moved to a Discord server, and I met my first furry friends pretty much in that Discord server, and it seemed like everybody was getting into relationships. Now, granted, these weren't the most long-lasting relationships, and they often ended painfully, but 2 weeks later, they were dating somebody else, and I was like, this is going to happen to me. I'm going to find a relationship here in the fandom, and it's going to be wonderful. And it didn't happen. It didn't even get close to happening. And I started to get really upset, like, was there something wrong with me? Then I started paying more attention to the demographics and more attention to who were finding themselves getting into dating relationships in the furry fandom. And I realized a few things. If you are a male looking to get into a relationship with another male, the furry fandom is a great place to do that. If you don't fall into that category, you might be better off using dating sites and apps or just going out and meeting people the old-fashioned way. You can always introduce your significant other to the fandom, and if they don't like the fandom and they don't like the fact that you're a furry,
dump them.
Just kidding about dumping them. I actually know a lot of people whose significant others are not furries and they tolerate each other's differences just fine. Eventually, I realized that I didn't really want a relationship. I just sort of wanted one because it seemed like it was normal and everybody else was doing it. And eventually, I found a best friend, ironically from that same Discord server. Although it's not a romantic relationship and it's long distance, it fulfills that need for me. And everything's good now. I'm also asexual spectrum enough that it sort of removes some motivation anyway. Misconception number 4 that I had when I joined the furry fandom. I thought that by putting myself out there on social media and on YouTube that I would become popular. Now, I realize that I really don't want that now, and I'm glad that didn't happen because I see people who are more popular in the fandom, and it sounds like it's more of a pain in the butt than it's worth. But I had watched furry YouTube channels that started in 2014 and 2015 and 2016 just really take off in popularity super fast, and I was like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and that's going to happen to me. I started being active on furry YouTube and social media kind of after that point, around 2017, 2018. Things were changing on YouTube. The market for furry YouTube was getting saturated, and let's be honest, I'm kind of a niche channel, and I don't really fit all the demographics of channels that have really big followings. And that's a good thing now. I'm happy that I have a small but loyal group of viewers on YouTube and people that follow me on Twitter and stuff like that. I'm recognizable enough from YouTube and social media that I get to meet more people at cons and things like that, but I'm not so big that I'm getting bombarded with direct messages all the time and bothered by people. Well, for the most part. Trust me, you probably don't want to be popular in the furry fandom. It's more trouble than it's worth. With that said, hey, how about hitting that subscribe button? Alright, my next misconception that I had when I joined the furry fandom is that it was going to be cheap. When I first started seeing these amazing looking fursuits, I was like, oh wow, a top tier fursuit like this, that's probably $500 or $600. Artwork, oh, really nice piece of art, probably $10. Yeah, that was a huge misconception. I realized really quick that even a basic fursuit was well over $1,000, probably closer to $2,000 or $3,000 from a newer maker, and ones from top tier makers were getting up there in the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 range at that point. Artwork too. I mean, one of my favorite artists regularly sells YCH pieces for $1,500 US. Now, I mean, good for them. They're a great artist, and I'm glad they're getting that much money and they're able to support themselves with their art, but wow, I didn't realize how expensive the fandom could be. Now, you don't have to spend a lot of money to enjoy the fandom. If you don't get a whole lot of your own artwork made, or you get artwork done by new artists or people that are just doing some practice or something and are willing to do it for free, don't ask artists for free art though. That's not the way to do it. And you don't need a fursuit, and you don't travel to cons and stuff like that. You can basically be a furry for free. But if you're like me and you like to have fursuits and you like to have really nice expensive art and you like to travel to a lot of cons, it can add up quick. I spend quite a bit of money every year on it, but this is my primary hobby, and this was a life-changing experience to me. It's made me honestly into a better person being involved in the furry fandom, and it's worth the investment for me. So the good thing here is you kind of get to choose whether you want furry to be an expensive hobby or an inexpensive hobby or even a free one. It really just depends on what you want, but the prices can add up quick, and it can become a very expensive hobby if you let it. So the last misconception I had when I became active in the furry fandom was that it was an escape, that you put on this character and you became the character. Whether you had a fursuit or not, you're just representing yourself as a character on social media. Things like politics and drama and stuff like that just wouldn't be a part of it. Oh, wow, was I wrong on that, Twitter. At first I was a little confused by it, but now I understand it more. Especially in the Western furry world, people tend to have more fursonas rather than characters. Now, I did a whole video in the past on this topic. A fursona is just you portrayed as an anthropomorphic animal character, so it would share all of what you are, your politics, religion, sexual orientation. So with that in mind, I kind of understand now more why people would want to be politically active in the furry community. The LGBT+ community is represented heavily in the furry fandom, as well as a lot of other groups of people that historically haven't been treated very well by certain political groups. And I get why people are angry about it. Now for me, my characters are characters, so I'm not going to get up on YouTube and start talking about politics or on Twitter or social media. It's just not really a part of my personal fandom involvement. That certainly doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with using the furry fandom as a vehicle for political involvement. Now, in terms of furry drama, I mean, we're human beings underneath these costumes or underneath the art or whatever. Unfortunately, that means there's going to be drama all over the place. If you put a group of human beings together, at some point there's going to be some level of drama. It's just a fact. It's reality. That's what happens. We just have to deal with it. Maybe you're part of the drama. Maybe you like being part of the drama. I know some people that are, and that's cool too if that's your thing. So, what misconceptions did you have when you joined the furry fandom? Did you have it all figured out? Did you have some stuff totally wrong? What do you think of my 6? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know down in the comments. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back at you next week. Until then, stay fuzzy and stay awesome. See you later.